Back on MorningLine, our guest is David Raybin. We're going to get some phone calls here in a moment. But yeah, the question going into the break will be from some, and maybe one of the callers is going to ask this, is, David, all right, you say a juvie kills someone. Maybe the idea of blended sentence could be a solution for a juvenile doing it. An adult killing that very same person is going to get it. Why should the juvie get any special consideration?
It's not special consideration, it's just consideration.
Okay.
And then the interesting thing, the same people who say, oh, you know, let's lock them up and throw away the key or whatever. But if the same person, their son or their nephew commits a horrible crime, they come to me and say, oh, he's a good kid.
Yeah,
he ought to be given some consideration.
Empathy,
you know,
yeah.
I said, well, what about all this position you took on the other case? Well, that's only for those people. Okay, it's for those people. Well, those are the people. But, you know, my kid is different, and we want to have separate consideration. So it depends on which side of the fence you are.
But the bottom line is a child is different than an adult, is what you're saying.
Of course a child is different than an adult. And the consequences should be different for the child, which is not to say that there may be some children who are so incorrigible that as you review the case in an appropriate way, you say they're not going to get out. But the other thing is this. Deterrence. This is what you really want to talk about. People say, well, without these kind of sentences, how are we ever going to deter these people from committing crimes? Deterrence works up to a point. But the people who killed these market people the other day, they're going to say, oh, gee, am I facing life without parole, or will I get out in 25 years? They don't think they're going to get caught. That's the whole point of this. And so you want to put your dollars in law enforcement to apprehend people and create a greater deterrent to committing the crime to begin with. Or you do some issues, you do some intervention in the schools or whatever, and you put your dollars there.
Yeah, I've never believed harsh punishments serve as deterrent. What they are is punishment and getting them off the streets so they're not a risk to anyone else. But you're exactly right. Come on. Well, everyone on death row, they all think they're not going to get killed. No one's sitting there weighing it, I want to kill that person, but if I get caught, I get the death penalty. What am I going to do? No,
it's not like when
it's not a deterrent.
It's not like when you go to Las Vegas and you decide whether you want to bet on a 5 or a 6.
It doesn't happen that way.
It doesn't happen that way. The only the purpose of the punishment is several. You incapacitate the person. There's also a degree of retribution that's involved. You say, we have to make a statement that this was wrong. But mostly it's to incapacitate the person so they're not out committing other crimes. They're no more threat. But at some point there has to be an end to this, and then the person ages out. They age out of those weird behaviors. You know, I mean, people often ask me, you know, what is the thing? I mean, I got sent to military academy. I couldn't tell you why, but I did. And my brother was worse than me. They sent him too.
You're a troublemaker. What do you think, just off the top of your head, the cost of incarcerating a 14-year-old for the rest of his life, thinking he has at least another 50 years he's going to live? What's that cost? Oh,
well, the figures are in excess of perhaps $500,000 to $1 million because you have factors that the person is not out working, not doing anything. You have supervision issues. You have the cost of construction of prisons, which they don't build into this thing. So, to me, the best way to characterize it for something like 14-year-old, maybe $500,000 per person. You could build whole prisons for what you're doing for that. So the costs are astronomical, and you have intangible costs as well for hiring other prison guards and mostly building prisons. That's you know, bricks and mortar kind of stuff. You don't have the internet for prisoners. It's all bricks and mortars. And you go to these prisons, and I think that it would be appropriate for our legislators or those who pass the law not only to consider the victims, which they should, spend a little time, walk around a state penitentiary system and see what kind of things the people endure in there. But then they say, well, if it's so bad, why do they come back? And they do, unfortunately. So we don't do a good job of those things. Other states do. We're going in the wrong direction.
Let's take a call from John. John, good morning. Hi, John. Are you there, John?
I can't believe what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I truly cannot believe it. Are you serious that you think that you're going to rehab a 14-year-old that murders someone? It doesn't make any sense. because you do not understand, and I believe that you are only looking for, I don't know, more business, because what you're saying is absolutely incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. I was a police officer for over 20 years. They are repeat offenders. They will not be rehabilitated, because once they're in the juvenile system, they will absolutely be in the adult system the minute they turn 18, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you can say, well, you know, we don't build prisons for them, etc. We need to be. And that's why, sir, you make your living.
How would you like to respond?
Well, first of all, thank you for being a police officer. I think that was very good that you were out there protecting us. First of all, many juvenile facilities are just schools for crimes. And the gentleman is right. They go from juvenile court to adult court. But why do they do that? They've learned how to commit better crimes by being in the juvenile system, which doesn't rehabilitate them at all. The issue is, when he said they can't be rehabilitated, the answer is that some of them can. And I agree that there are some that cannot. But the issue here is to simply say that no juvenile commits murder could ever be rehabilitated is incorrect. Some can. I've met some people who've become who've rehabilitated themselves. The governors have pardoned some of them. The young woman who the governor pardoned, who committed a homicide at 16. LaToya Brown is a perfect example of that. She committed a serious murder. The governor granted her clemency in an individual case. The parole board paroled her. She's been rehabilitated by any definition. She's done well. There's some that are not LaToya Browns, but you have to have a system where somebody can make that decision one way or the other. To simply say under no circumstances will any 14-year or 15-year-old commit murder be considered is to have a trial by computer. We don't need judges. We don't need juries. We just say, you did that, goodbye, we're done here. I think there are some instances where rehabilitation is appropriate and can be accomplished, and there's some that cannot.
So I guess it's important to make the point, and I think maybe he's aware of it, but we're not saying let's make a case for every juvenile that commits a very serious adult crime to be rehabilitated and released. You're saying right now it's just across the board, no one's going to look at it. We have judges, we have a parole board and such to look at individual cases, and as you pointed out to me on more than one occasion when we've done stories, Nick, everyone just assumes they're eligible for parole, they're getting out. I mean, the parole board oftentimes, more often than not, does not grant parole anyway, at least for years, correct?
Correct.
So you're just saying there needs to be the review process, and in the absence of that, you're just going to have to build a ton more prisons.
Well, and that it is barbaric and inhumane to simply saying that because a person committed an offense, even a serious offense under certain circumstances, there'll be no consideration for rehabilitation. There'll be no credits on the sentence. That we're just going to give up on this person.
And you're not necessarily talking about murders. It could be any number of crimes.
Well, even in a murder case, okay, even in a murder case where the person can be rehabilitated. I've had instances where the victim's family comes to the hearing and says, look, as long as this person is under strict supervision, you know, it's okay to release them after 25 years or something like that. We forgive the person, that sort of thing. But you have to have a system where there's checks and balances and there are exceptions. That's why we have a criminal justice system. I mean, even if you look at the first murder that was ever committed, when Cain killed Abel, okay, God didn't just say, well, you're dead. You know, it was manslaughter. And he put a mark on his head and he banished him. I mean, he must have had a great lawyer to get that kind of result. But we've always had those checks and balances and exceptions in the rule. That's why we have courts and juries. And the gentleman who's been a police officer and has seen the worst of the worst, you know, he may be right about the vast majority of them, but not everyone. We'll take a break on that note when we come back. Wayne and Marion will get to your phone calls in our final segment with David Raybin right after this.